I just made a $20 billion bet against America. Now I want you to really let that sink in, because this is not just about money, not just about trade, not just about economics. This is about power, about confidence, about standing up and saying to the world, we are not afraid. India looked at the global stage, saw the strongest nation in the world sitting at the top, and instead of bowing, instead of hesitating, instead of doubting itself, it made a move so daring that people everywhere are left in shock. $20 billion, a decision that screams to the world that India is playing its own game now, and it is not going to wait for permission. That is not just a financial investment. That is a declaration of intent. That is a message written in bold letters. We are not followers anymore. We are leaders for decades. The world was used to one script. America decides, others follow. America speaks, others listen. America leads, others nod their heads. And then suddenly India steps up and says no. We're going to take $20 billion, not pocket change, not a side investment, but a massive commitment. And we're going to use it in a way that builds our future, not America's. That is not just economics, that is psychology, that is courage, that is independence being stamped on the ground like a thunderbolt. The world has seen countries resist America, but how many have done it with money, with investment, with building instead of breaking? That's what makes this bet so unique. India isn't screaming, it isn't threatening, it isn't crying out loud. It is simply making moves that say, watch us, we don't need your permission anymore, and here's the truth. That $20 billion bet, it isn't just numbers in an account. It represents faith. Faith in India's own strength. Faith in its industries. Faith in its ability to not only survive without leaning on America, but to thrive, to grow, to rise. For so long, people in the West looked at India as a follower, a service economy, a cheap labor hub. But this bet says, we are the innovators now. We are the creators now. We are going to build systems so strong that even America has to sit up and watch. It is not about competing anymore. It is about setting the rules of a new game. The most dangerous thing to a superpower is not war. It's not conflict. It's not even rebellion. It's self-belief in another nation. Because when a country starts believing in itself, truly believing that it doesn't need the approval of the world's strongest, that's when the balance of power shifts. That $20 billion is like planting a tree that will grow taller than anything America has ever imagined for India. Because once you plant it, it takes root. It starts spreading. It grows silently. And by the time anyone notices, it's too late. The roots are deep. The branches are wide. And the shadow is covering the world. That's what India just did now, let's be honest. America doesn't like bets against it. History shows that. Anytime another nation has tried to rise, America either tries to buy it, control it, or break it. But here's the difference. India is too big, too ancient, too powerful in its soul to be broken. You can sanction Russia, you can pressure smaller nations, you can intimidate leaders, but you cannot intimidate a civilization that has lived for over 5,000 years. You cannot shake a country that has survived empires, colonizers, famines, wars, and still stood up taller than ever. When India places a $20 billion bet, it is not just today's money. It is 5,000 years of survival instinct. It is the spirit of 1 billion people saying, we are ready now, and you know what makes this move even more powerful. It wasn't made out of anger. It wasn't made out of desperation. It was made out of confidence. Think about that. Most nations go against America only when they are cornered, only when they have no choice. But India is not cornered. India is rising. India has options. India has the fastest growing economy in the world, the largest pool of young talent, the strongest IT backbone, one of the most innovative defense industries, and a consumer base so massive that the world's biggest corporations are begging to enter. And in the middle of this rise, India takes $20 billion and says, let's bet on ourselves, not on you. That is the sound of a new superpower being born. America is watching. Make no mistake. They are watching closely because they know that when a country the size of India stops playing along, the entire system starts to crack. The dollar depends on obedience. The global order depends on compliance. But what happens when a billion-strong country says, no thank you? What happens when trade deals are rewritten, when defense partnerships are renegotiated, when technology is developed at home instead of imported? You get a new world order. That's what this bet is. A seed of a new order. A bet that the future will not be decided in Washington anymore, but in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Chennai. A bet that innovation can rise in Indian soil and not just in Silicon Valley. And let me tell you this, it's not just $20 billion. That's the headline. But the real value is 10 times, 100 times more. Because when a nation dares to risk that kind of money, it inspires confidence in its people, in its industries, in its allies. Other countries are watching too. Africa is watching, Southeast Asia is watching, the Middle East is watching. They are thinking, if India can do this, why can't we? If India can challenge America's monopoly, maybe we can too. So this one bet is not just India's. It's the beginning of a ripple effect that can sweep across the world. It is courage multiplying across continents, but courage is not enough. You need strategy, and India's strategy is brilliant. Instead of direct confrontation, instead of waving fists, instead of shouting slogans, India is playing smart. It is using money as its weapon, investment as its shield, trade as its sword. That's how you fight a superpower. You don't go to war with tanks and bombs. You go to war with ideas, with systems, with innovation. And India is doing exactly that. It is building alternatives, alternative payment systems, alternative supply chains, alternative defense technologies. So even if America closes one door, India has 5 more already open. That is genius, you know. People sometimes think strength means showing off, but real strength is quiet. Real strength is when you don't need to announce it, when your actions speak louder than any statement. And that's exactly what this $20 billion move is. A silent thunder, a storm without noise, a bet that doesn't need validation, because India knows that in 5 years, in 10 years, the results will speak for themselves. And when that day comes, it won't be about shocking America anymore. It will be about redefining the world. And here's what I want you to learn from this. Because this is not just about nations. This is about you, your life, your dreams, your future. India placed a $20 billion bet against the biggest power in the world. Why? Because it believed in itself. And that's the lesson. Do you believe in yourself enough to make a bet that scares people? Do you have the courage to invest in your own growth even when others doubt you? Most people live life safe, waiting for approval, waiting for guarantees. But greatness comes when you bet on yourself without guarantees. India could have played safe. It could have kept following America's lead. But it didn't. It dared. And that's why the world is watching. Every person has 2 choices. Live small or bet big. India chose to bet big. And I want you to understand something. Betting big doesn't mean recklessness. It means calculated courage. It means studying your strengths, knowing your worth, and then making a move that tells the world, I know who I am. India knows who it is now. That is why $20 billion isn't just money, it's identity. It's proof that India has stopped seeing itself as a follower and started seeing itself as a leader. Think about the psychology here. For decades, India's narrative was always developing country, always catching up, always behind, always waiting for others to set the pace. This bet erases that narrative. It says, we are not developing anymore, we are defining. And that's why America is unsettled, because once a nation stops seeing itself as weak, no one can make it weak again. That mental shift is irreversible, and $20 billion just bought India not only projects and industries, it bought a new mindset for its people. A mindset of leadership, of pride, of power. Now I want you to picture this. 10 years from now, the world looks back. They will say, remember when India made that $20 billion move? Remember how everyone doubted? Remember how the experts laughed? And then remember how everything changed after that? That's how history is written. One bold move, one daring decision, one act of courage that changes the course of nations. India just wrote that chapter, and the pen was made of $20 billion, so don't get it twisted. This isn't about America losing and India winning. This is about the world shifting from one power to many powers, from one leader to many leaders, from one voice to a chorus. And India is the loudest voice right now, not because it's shouting, but because it dared to speak with action. $20 billion worth of action, and to everyone who still doubts, who still asks, can India really do this? Let me tell you something. The question is not can India, the question is who can stop India, because once you place a bet like this, you are not looking for permission anymore. You are already running, and the world is struggling to catch up. And that is the true power of this move. India is not asking anymore, it is deciding, and the world will have to live with that decision. That's what it means when we say India just made a $20 billion BT against America. It means the game has changed, the balance has shifted, the future is being rewritten. And no matter what happens next, one thing is certain, India has arrived, and it is here to stay. History will remember this as the moment India stopped asking for a seat at the table and started building its own, because for decades India lived with the perception of being invited, of waiting for recognition, of seeking validation from powers that thought they owned the script of global politics. And yet something has shifted, something profound, something irreversible, and it is no longer about waiting for America or Europe to extend a hand. It is about extending its own hand and shaping its own destiny, and that is why this moment is not just a financial or diplomatic decision, but a civilizational turning point, one that fuses economics, defense, culture, and technology into a singular statement of intent that the future will not be outsourced, the future will not be dictated, the future will not be gifted, it will be built. It marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine backed by innovation, and this is critical because military doctrines are not just about weapons or uniforms or strategies. They are about psychology, about mindset, about the way a nation perceives its own strength, and until now India's military posture was largely defensive, largely reactive, built on protecting sovereignty, but not necessarily projecting confidence. And now the tide has turned. Now the doctrine is evolving into something bolder, sharper, clearer, and it is no longer about waiting for threats, but about shaping the environment in which those threats appear. It is about taking initiative, about dictating tempo, about not being caught off guard, and that shift has been empowered by innovation, by the development of indigenous technologies that make India independent in ways it never was before. Think about the Akashin, the BrahMos upgrades, the nuclear submarine program, the indigenous aircraft carriers, the homegrown missile defense systems. These are not isolated projects. They are chapters of a book that is being written in silence but is louder than any declaration, and this book tells the story of a nation that is preparing to not just survive attacks, but to prevent them by showing such formidable strength that adversaries think twice. And that is the essence of deterrence, not aggression, but the courage to project power in such a way that conflict becomes unthinkable, and in that lies the brilliance of India's doctrine. A doctrine born not of insecurity, but of innovation. The $20 billion bet becomes symbolic in this regard because it is not only economic, but also military. For every dollar invested into independence of technology, into strengthening industrial bases, into creating a self-reliant ecosystem, is a dollar that cannot be controlled by Washington, by Beijing, by Moscow, or by anyone else. It is a dollar that strengthens India's spine, and the doctrine that emerges from this is one that says India will not be a pawn. India will not be a market for imported systems alone. India will not outsource its defense to any alliance. India will build its own shield, its own sword, its own fortress, and that fortress is built on innovation. What makes this moment unforgettable is that it comes not from desperation but from choice, because India could have continued to play safe, could have continued to wait for America's nod, could have continued to sit at the edges of the table and be happy with crumbs of recognition, but instead India looked at its billion-strong population, its thousand-year-old civilizational depth, its cutting-edge youth-driven talent base, and decided that it no longer needed to wait. It could build, it could innovate, it could redefine, and in doing so, it rejected the old posture of asking and embraced the new posture of asserting. History will not record this as a gamble. It will record this as a strategy, because a gamble is blind. It relies on luck. But this is calculated, this is thought out, this is rooted in years of groundwork laid by scientists, engineers, defense planners, diplomats, and visionaries who prepared the soil for this seed to be planted, and now that it has been planted, it will grow into a doctrine that integrates economic sovereignty with defense resilience, that connects financial autonomy with military strength, and that fuses technological breakthroughs with geopolitical confidence. When a nation stops asking for a seat at the table, it implicitly declares that the table itself is not the final destination, that it has the capacity to build not just one table but an entire house, and in that house there is space for others, but on its terms, not on dictated terms, and this is what unnerves superpowers, because control relies on compliance. But once a country like India breaks free from compliance, control collapses, and innovation becomes the currency of power, not approval, not alliances, not invitations, and India has stepped into that era. Consider how this transformation is already visible in defense exports that are reaching nations across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. In space technology that is putting India among the top 3 powers of exploration, in digital infrastructure that rivals anything in the West, in financial systems that are experimenting with alternatives to dollar dominance. These are not scattered events. These are signals of an ecosystem that no longer needs permission, no longer needs validation, and that is what will be remembered in history. That India reached a point where asking became irrelevant, and building became instinct. This doctrine of assertion is not just military, it is cultural, it is philosophical, it is rooted in the idea that survival is no longer enough, that existence is no longer enough, that thriving, leading, and shaping are the new minimum, and this is what fuels the new identity of India on the global stage, because for centuries India was seen as a land to be invaded, exploited, colonized, divided, weakened, and yet the very same land today is seen as the architect of a multipolar world. And that transformation did not come from asking politely, it came from standing up, building deliberately. The $20 billion moment will be remembered as the ignition point, the spark that made it clear that India's doctrine is not reactive anymore, it is proactive. It is not about crisis management anymore. It is about future management. It is not about being told what role it can play. It is about deciding what role it will play, and this decision will echo across continents, because once one nation shows that it can build its own table, others will follow, and the monopoly of power will fracture, and in that fracture new opportunities for balance and fairness will emerge. India's assertive doctrine will not be written in stone on some battlefield. It will be written in the laboratories of DRDO, in the launch pads of ISRO, in the data centers of Bengaluru, in the financial hubs of Mumbai, in the strategic halls of Delhi. It will be written in innovation, in resilience, in determination, and every project, every breakthrough, every defense system, every alternative trade corridor, every digital platform will become another piece of wood in the table that India is building, a table so large, so firm, so unshakable, that the world will no longer debate whether India belongs at the table, but will realize that India is the one who built it, and when historians look back, they will not point to one speech or one declaration or one negotiation. They will point to this moment, the $20 billion bet, the innovation-backed doctrine, shift from asking to building, and they will say this was the turning point. This was the moment when the psychology of a nation changed, when the posture of a civilization was reborn, when India declared without words, but through action, that it was done waiting, done seeking approval, done accepting limits, and ready to construct its own destiny with its own hands, its own tools, its own vision, and its own power.